Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Tina Jha. You're watching Perspective. The global power sector is about to enter a new era of falling fossil generation as coal, oil and gas are pushed out of the grid by a record expansion of wind and solar power. Now this as per a new analysis by climate think tank Ember, which says wind and solar power reached a record 12% of global electricity generation last year, driving up the overall share of low-carbon electricity to almost 40% of the total generation. The think tank forecasts that by the end of 2023, more than 100% of the growth in electricity demand will be covered by the low-carbon sources. For the world to stay on track for its climate targets, global electricity generation needs to be completely decarbonized by the year 2040. That's what experts have said. So in this edition of Perspective, we will analyze the key findings and forecasts of this report that indicates the beginning of a long-term decline in fossil fuel usage in the power sector. Besides, we'll also talk to experts about India's decarbonization target and the roadmap towards achieving this target. And for this, I'm pleased to welcome three distinguished panelists on this edition of Perspective. With me in the studio is Mr. Chandra Bhushan, CEO, International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology. Mr. Bhushan, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program. And joining me virtually are Mr. Upendra Tripathi, former Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Ms. Urmi Goswami, Senior Journalist. Thank you to both of you as well for joining us virtually on this edition of Perspective. Mr. Bhushan, allow me to begin the program today with you. So this report comes just a few weeks after the IPCC report, which said humanity is at crossroads. The countries need to work together to ensure that we are well within the targets of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Do you think with this now, with this report and the forecast, that fossil fuel generation is on a decline, the climate transition, the energy transition that the world was looking towards is happening at a rapid pace?
So I think there's one correction here. In absolute term, we are still consuming more coal, more oil and more gas than what we consumed last year, in absolute term. Whereas in percentage term, obviously now non-fossil sources are 40%, which is a great achievement. So this report is a good news. There's no question about it that the world is moving towards decarbonization. I think the pace has picked up in last 1 year, and one of the reasons is that world is recognizing the importance of energy security. And Russia-Ukraine war has made the world very energy insecure, and therefore there's a lot of investment that is happening in clean energy technology as well. But overall, I think if this pace is maintained, we will reach the IPCC, if not hit the IPCC target, but at least reach within the goals of IPCC. But it's still a long way to go. We are still far away because solar and wind, which are the two key technologies, are only about 12%. And then there is hydro and nuclear and biomass. Right. They are still the same. 18% of the 40% is still these three traditional sources of energy. So we still have a long way to go. But overall, a good news, a news that should make people who are working on energy transition happy.
Okay, Mr. Tripathi, but here, the twist in the tale is this is not the first time that fossil fuel power generation has seen a decline. Prior to this, during the recession years in 2008, in 2020, this has happened. Could this time also be because of the Russia-Ukraine war and Russia being a major energy supplier, the world, and major countries who were dependent on Russia had no choice but to switch towards clean energy? Could these numbers be also reflective of that?
It could be actually, because of both the factors. When we're talking about global recession or slowdown, and we're talking about a war, disruption in supply, how the Russian gas pipeline burst and all that. So all these things could have contributed to a decline, but we should also look at, as Chandra pointed out, to the good things that the renewable energy or the non-fossil amount of energy that we get from non-fossil sources is going up. But having a broader perspective, you find that the awareness is increasing. And the fear that we are going to miss the 1.5 degree Celsius, the global mean temperature target, right, that is also setting in. So I would say the global leadership, despite Ukraine issues, is responding much more. And countries like India are becoming more active in terms of promoting renewable. If you look at 500 gigawatt target of non-fossil energy from the Prime Minister. But also we are realizing the risk of the things that we are not doing. For example, if you look at the global warming gases, it is not only carbon dioxide. There are other gases, for example, methane. And there are non-energy sectors which have to be tackled. Industry, for example, cement, steel, we're talking about green cement, green steel, we haven't reached yet. Heavy transportation, where, electricity cannot reach, the heavy trucks, they can't use electricity. And the dairy sector, animal husbandry, agriculture, soil, which is a big sink for, carbon. So whether, we had a short-term achievement or not, but global leadership is realizing that we need to have speed, skill, and scale, and we have to do things beyond the energy sector because there are other risks involved.
Absolutely, you're right. And most importantly, it's something that everyone needs to work together. So now how will it percolate down to the other, economies, the less developed countries is something that we'll have to also discuss in the course of the program. Ms. Goswami, the fact is, and this report at the same time also points out, it's been seen that till date, electricity demand growth has generally outpaced the rapid expansion of low carbon sources. Across the world, 771 million people still lack access to electricity. So if we say, when we work towards the idea of leaving no one behind, ensuring that everyone has access to electricity, especially in these countries that I just referred to, do you think demand growth will once again impact energy transition, at least the pace at which it's happening?
Look, it's the Ember report takes a certain, it's like all reports, all projections based on certain presumptions. So what it is looking at is the actual, which is 40% of electricity generation last year was from low carbon or non-fossil fuel sources. Wind and solar, which is actually going to be the ones driving the clean energy pace, are only 12%. So that's what it sees last year. But it is also seeing that in 2022, you had the US Congress or the US government sign into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which basically looks at incentivizing all forms of low carbon energy. So basically the entire gamut. Right. Now that is a huge policy push. It's a huge economic push that could lead to, or that is likely to lead to, addition of more renewable capacity or more low carbon capacity. And on the other hand, on the other side of the Atlantic, you have the Green Deal, which again is systematically being putting in place a path for decarbonization. The Russia-Ukraine war, which jolted the European Union about its dependence, its over-dependence on a single source for its energy needs, that's Russia for gas, is obviously doing two things. It's diversifying its sources, which is sources of gas, LNG, but also pushing forward a renewable energy program or a clean energy program. And that is, we can see it in their RE-Power program. So what you have are all these possibilities. And then you see things like in India, where we have a target for 2030, which is, of course, this one is a purely domestic target of 450 gigawatts of solar and wind, but and a 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel, that is low carbon sources. So these are all the things that you are basing on, and based on track record or the robustness of the target or the intention of the target, there's a presumption that your growth in renewable energy is going to be, or low carbon energy is going to be immense. That is what this report is actually sort of brought together. Now, the question you ask about 778 million people still not having access to energy, and whether these they will fall back on fossil fuels because that is the simplest thing to do. Well, hopefully not, because but there is no guarantee, of course, because it depends on how the system unfolds.
Right.
But the fact that you have such a huge demand and you have policies in place to cater to creating that supply would also mean you drive prices down. And driving prices down would make it possible for these geographies where most of the 778 million are located, which is in poor developing countries or least developed countries, uh, basically with countries which are facing other forms of economic crisis, particularly because of the debt crisis. They will be able to onboard their people to accessing electricity using cleaner sources simply because it gets cheaper. So a lot of it is based on the fact that you have two big economies, and you also have China. Despite the fact that China is sort of adding coal power plants, it's also been a place where renewables are being pushed. So what the expectation is, it's going to drive down costs of things like storage,
Right.
because that is critical to ensuring that you can have 24/7 renewable sources of energy, you can harness them.
In fact, as you
And I
speak
think
and the things that you point out, these are the focus areas of the G20 conference on energy transition that is currently underway. India is taking the lead, and it is talking about the challenges, the opportunities in research and innovation. Also, most importantly, cooperation among the countries when it comes to smart energy transformation. That is one question. I'll come to you, Mr. Tripathi, in just a bit. But Mr. Bhushan, coming to you first to understand the importance of decarbonization, how global experts have said complete decarbonization is important for the world till 2040. In that aspect, if I would like to understand from you, India has set ambitious targets, the roadmap that we are following. Are we on track to meet these targets?
Well, considering, so let me first of all answer this question in two parts. The first part is that the 2040 target is for the electricity sector. But electricity sector is an important sector simply because everything is going to move to electricity. Currently, only about 20% of our total energy is consumed in the form of electricity. 80% we burn. We either directly burn coal in a factory, in a steel plant or a cement plant. So of the total energy consumption that humanity does, 20% is only in the form of electricity. Now, to meet the climate target, that 20% has to become 80%, which means that direct burning of fuel has to be only about 10-15% of our energy basket. So this is a big target. On one hand, your electricity consumption will keep increasing. On the other hand, we have to keep decarbonizing that electricity consumption. Okay, so if we are able to, I am not sure that we will be able to meet 2040 target, considering that 80% of our all energy will have to be met through electricity. So I have a little bit of caution on that front. Now, as far as India is concerned, looking at last few years of growth in renewable sector, we are installing half of what we should be to meet 500 gigawatt target. So I think we should be installing about 30 to 40 gigawatt every year to meet 500 gigawatt target. We are installing about less than 20 gigawatt. Okay. I think our best has been around 18 gigawatt, something like that. So we are falling behind from our target. There is no question about it. And one of the reasons has been disruption in the renewable energy market.
Right.
Prices of solar panel today is higher than what they were before COVID. And there is supply chain constraint. We are also realizing that we cannot overly depend on China for importing all our panels. That's what we do. In fact, the big development that has happened in India is our realization that we must be producing our own solar panels, batteries, and therefore government has put into place production-linked incentives for both renewable energy as well as for the battery. But having said that, I'm not sure that we will meet our 500 gigawatt target, but I will be very happy if we can even meet 350, 400 gigawatt. It would be a great achievement for this country if we can meet about 400 gigawatt target.
Okay. Mr. Tripathi, as you know, one of the most populous countries, our demands are only going to increase at least in the next few years. The question here is, it has to be equitable, it has to be clean at the same time. The target is huge. We are running behind the target, as Mr. Bhushan suggests. How do we tackle these impediments? In fact, how do we accelerate efforts to meet these shortcomings?
Well, I must go back to 2014 when Mr. Piyush Goyal was the minister and I happened to be the secretary in Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, and we did plan for 100 gigawatt, and the rooftop part didn't come through because of COVID and other things. So once we decided a target of 500 gigawatt for the country, the provincial governance and the federal union government, they work together. There is some rough 60-40 ratio. So 500 gigawatt for a country like India is not impossible. And given the size of the country, given the actors, institutions, ideas we have, despite a little increase in the prices and all that is possible. But as Chandra pointed out, we have to have much more every year than what we have now. So we have to really have a strategy, to have a target. We have to address 4 issues: land, labor, capital, and technology. And personally speaking, I think 500 gigawatt, India can definitely do it, provided they deftly address these issues and have a sort of, cell, in government, which of course they must be having, to address issues on a day-to-day basis. There has to be a little bit of, the PM's principles of speed, skill, and scale. And these 3 things have to be brought in. And India has to meet this target because first time we put a target of, 175 gigawatt. We missed it unless we took into account the gigawatts that were under contract or on the pipeline. So 500 gigawatt we cannot afford to lose because then we lose our global image. So I'm sure government is aware of that and all the steps they're taking, the seriousness that has come in, the type of investments that is coming in, the ease of doing business that is going up in most of the provinces, and the type of move and efforts that is coming on to link storage. I think the good policies are coming in and it'll ensure that we achieve it.
You spoke about global image. That leads me to another question that I want to ask Ms. Goswami. As the president of G20, we are also taking the lead in ensuring that there is cooperation among countries, especially those countries of the global south that find no representation at global platforms in areas like smart energy transformation, in areas like research and innovation, technology transfer, something wherein now we've begun to take lead and we want to pass on the benefits to the other countries as well on the principle of Vasudev Kutumbakam. The whole challenge is until we fulfill our own ambitions, how do we help the others? So how do we find an appropriate balance to achieve both and which will not dent our global image as well?
Well, it's interesting that you put it this way, and as to addressing that, I want to sort of concur with CV that yes, India is falling short of meeting its target, but I also agree with Mr. Tripathi that 500 gigawatts for a country like India is not really a lot, given our rising requirements and demand. So there should be a way to do both. And that is where the answer to your question lies. There is a different way of doing things, and that is actually about aggregating interest, aggregating demand, but not just demand for electricity, but in terms of working together in partnership. Now, India does understand that it has limitations like the ones we have discussed. In this case, the limitations are obviously in terms of access to resources, finance being an issue. Sometimes in some cases it's technology. In some cases it is just about having the right kind of policies. But India's approach to many things, if you look at it in the past, and the International Solar Alliance, which Mr. Tripathi headed in the initial years, is a perfect example of that. It is the core belief that we cannot resolve these problems on our own. And this is not just talk. It's actually that we need to put in, everybody brings to the table what they have best. So when you say that do you think India's G20 presidency can actually provide a pathway for also countries that have high needs while meeting its own demand? The question is that blurring of line has to happen. You bring together the greater demand. Together you can push down a lot of in terms of cost. As the size of your demand grows, the cost comes down. Or you work together in terms of solutions. I'll give you an example from on the early warning system, IRIS, which is actually it's done under the platform of CDRI, but it is about working together specifically for this island states which are most vulnerable. Now, India brings its expertise, which is the manpower, the technology, and there is money that has come in from some other partners, and then there is the need. So you work together. So can you meet your own goals while addressing other countries' needs? Yes, you can. Because what is a big thing for us, which is true for large parts of the developing world, which is the need for access to clean, affordable, and accessible energy. Now, for affordable, the clean, we know what it should be, but affordable comes from that scale. So I would not think of India struggling with its own ambition as being a barrier to working together or to helping countries which are poorer or less developed in this transition. And the other part of the story is it's a spectrum, right? I mean, yes, we are somewhere on the spectrum, but there are countries which have needs and may not have the capacity that we have, and those capacities we can address. When we are talking in terms of partnerships or flows of technology and finance, we expect that the developed countries will make those flows, and as you know, in the global conversation, there is a focus on helping emerging countries do better. I suppose in that sense, emerging countries like ours can also do better by working together with other less developed countries to address the issues that we have. So I don't see this as a problem.
You're right, and in fact, India is
it's about
working.
How you plan it.
You're right. India, in fact, is working towards forging these kinds of cooperation and partnerships among member countries of the G20, at least, Mr. Bhushan, to begin with. The question, and I come back to India again, is the challenge is huge. We have very less time. What is the best way to go forward? Also, in terms of diversifying, the sources. How can hydrogen be of immense help to India? How are we exploring that particular area?
Tina, I think we don't have to get caught up in this target business. I don't think India's reputation is linked to 500 gigawatt. I think that's not the way to look at it. 500 gigawatt is an ambition we have put, and in the larger context of India's energy decarbonization, we have to see it. We meet 400, and if it is decarbonizing our economy, very good. In fact, I believe that we can do a lot in energy efficiency, which we are not doing, by the way, to actually cut our demand. We are wasting a lot of electricity. Whether in industry, we have done very well in the lighting sector, for example. India is leader in LED lighting across the world, and it has cut our electricity demand by 10,000 megawatt. So we can do a lot to cut our demand, which will mean we do not need to install and install and install. That's not what is required. That is point number one. Point number two is that only certain part of the country is getting renewable energy. And I want to pick up from what Mr. Tripathi said, and he said something very important, that it has to be we are a federal country. States will have to pitch in to meet this target.
Absolutely.
Currently, most of renewable energy is coming only in 7 states. 4 western and 4 southern and 3 western states have 80 to 85% of renewable energy installation. Large part of the country is not seeing renewable energy revolution. So we need to get renewable energy to central India, eastern India, northeast, and every part of India actually has more solar potential than Germany. So there is no part of India where renewable energy cannot be installed.
Absolutely.
So the second part is, if we have to meet the target, then it has to be all India effort. It cannot be only few states which can install renewable energy. And as far as hydrogen is concerned, I think India has taken a lead in hydrogen because India also has a target, which is energy independence target of 2047, which Prime Minister has announced from Red Fort, that we import 80 to 90% of our oil and gas. It has huge implication on energy security, foreign exchange outgoing, our trade deficit. And if we invest well in hydrogen, if India can become a big hydrogen player, we will be able to reduce our dependence on imported fossil fuel, which is good for economy, good for energy security, good for environment. So I think hydrogen could be a game changer if we do it well.
That's something that the government has put its thrust on. Let's see how it capitalizes into the kind of energy security and energy efficiency that we want for our country. Time allows me to take up only that much on this edition of Perspective. We'll have to stop at that. Thank you, Mr. Tripathi, Ms. Goswami and Mr. Chandrabhushan for joining us on the program today, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.